Welcome back to The Book People, where I interview people whose lives and careers revolve around books. I'm your host Aishwarya, and today we are going to talk about independent publishing houses and how they really fill the gaps by publishing niche and specialized topics, or by publishing stories or authors that maybe don't get that much of representation in mainstream publishing. So, I'm talking to Ishani Butalia from Zubaan. So Zubaan is an independent feminist publishing house, and they're known for a lot of different things, but also for publishing a lot of Dalit and Northeastern narratives, among other marginalized voices. So Ishani has worked at Zubaan for 7 years, and she's an editor that commissions all kinds of books, but especially commissions for their young adult and children section called Young Zubaan. And I've actually worked closely with Ishani when I interned with Zubaan in 2017. So we talk about what exactly does she look for in a book, especially if it's something that hasn't been published before. How does she know that people want to read it? And we also talk about how independent publishing houses measure if a book has been successful or not. How do they decide what kind of books are going to work, what kind of books need to be out there? So if you are writing a unique or a niche book and you're not sure where to pitch it, we can help you. So DM us or send us an email at connect@boundindia.com with your book pitch and at least 3 chapters of your manuscript, and we can get started from there. But right now, let's come back to Ishani and let's figure out how she decides which books to publish and what gaps to fill. Let's tune in. Hi Ishani, welcome to the Book People. I am so glad to have you here. With everything that Zubaan does, what is the gap that you're trying to fill? Or, what are the books that you feel like aren't there in this industry, or books that you want to read that you feel like we don't see in India that you want to publish?
So I think for everybody at Zubaan, that's probably going to be answered differently. I think for us, so I know that originally when Zubaan started, what Urvashi wanted was something that is a lot more easy for people to understand because it's quantifiable, which is that there just were fewer women writers in the market overall, and overall much less weight, significance, credibility given to women authors. But I think now that certain kinds of women writing have a larger place in the so-called market, and I hate saying market because it's like manufactured by what people want to publish as opposed to what people want to acknowledge other people want to read. Now in the market, certain kinds of women's writing is visible. I think the challenge for us is that which it's always been and is also part of being part of the women's movement, women's movements, I should say, is that you have to assess what is still missing. And a lot of things are still missing, not for lack of existing, but for lack of access and the route being clear, or even, profitable is a big thing. That the route is not profitable it's not profitable for us, let alone for our poor authors. Maybe I shouldn't be saying that. But I think it's hard to say, okay, now we want to publish this one thing. But our plan is to make sure that every year, every time we have a commissioning meeting, every time we sit and have like a fight over what we should and should not publish, it has to be an evolving conversation of not like what we want, but what we see the
like what you see isn't there almost.
Yeah, what you see isn't there, and how oral history is changing, how women's articulation of themselves, women and queer people, non-binary people's articulations of themselves are evolving. And that's what needs to be in books. There's a lot of it online, but not everybody has access to it being online. And it's not everybody spends their whole day, like rage scrolling on Twitter. I'm saying this to myself. So you might not find it, but there's something else that you get when you read it in a book, and that's what we're trying to get to.
So how did you decide to become an editor, and what has your sort of publishing journey been like?
I don't know if I ever decided to become an editor. In fact, I only sometimes remember when people ask me, what do you do? That I'm supposed to say editor, because technically that's what I do.
What do you
But
think? What is the first thing that comes to your mind when people ask, what do you do?
we have a very NGO vibe, like internally and externally also we have a very NGO vibe.
Yeah.
Half the work I do is very NGO work. So, but then again, I'm also an editor, which is goes into this murky territory of like a company, which is a profit-making enterprise. And then it's very difficult to reconcile those two parts. So then I make it shorter and tell people editor and not reveal my many anxieties to them the first time I meet them.
That's fair. What are you reading right now?
I wish I had a good answer for this. I am reading something right now. It's a book by Gyasi called Transcendent Kingdom.
Yeah,
But
I've heard of
I have
it.
been
Yes.
reading it for a month because every time I pick it up, I've turned into the kind of person, I'm not, knocking this kind of person. I have just become this person who reads 3 pages of a book and thinks, now I can go to sleep. Her first novel was called Homegoing, and it was amazing. And I think when she wrote that or when she published that, she was 27. And I think I was also roughly that age. So I read that and was very angry. How dare she? So on and so forth. Now that I think about it, at least she's not younger than me. There are now a lot of people who are younger than me and writing fantastic books. So yeah, that's what I'm reading right now. And also I have a copy of Notes on Camp by Sontag that my flatmate left in the house when she was unceremoniously like locked into another country. And I've just stolen all her books. So now I'm reading them.
I mean, books are the best thing to steal, right? So,
Yeah. Unless, of course, the person minds, in which case, give them back.
that's true. Obviously, I mean, I don't think I would appreciate it if anyone stole my books.
I think it's a delicate balance. If you can keep telling them, listen, I've stolen your book, I'll give it back to you, it's okay. But if you turn to the, I don't know if I have it, kind of,
Yeah.
gaslighting thing, then no, that's not okay.
So, what does a working day for you look like? Or even a week?
I'm not trying to remember what I did yesterday.
Yes, tell us
So
everything you did yesterday.
primarily, it looks like a lot of cups of tea and then a lot of judgment when I tell people I'm drinking tea and they're like, what happened to you? You used to drink coffee. And then I say, I just sit at home all day. I can't digest coffee. Um, there's a lot. There's a lot of emails. There's a lot of Excel sheets. There's a lot of Word documents. I think maybe other people in like bigger publishing houses actually use publishing software, but we have a lot of very, very heavy and glitchy Word documents full of track changes that I think are the burden of most small editors, possibly some big place editors as well. And then there's a lot of just, I think because we're a small place, it's a lot of coordinating with the other members of the team. And then I want to say we do more like just reading of manuscripts, but I don't get a lot of time to do that. So sometimes I end up doing that in the middle of the night, 3 pages, fall asleep.
Even with manuscripts?
Um, yeah. And then you have to figure out if the 3 pages fall asleep is, the manuscript or if it's you.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask you that. That was gonna be my next question. How do you know whether it's you or is the manuscript? Or, like in a very formal way, like what do you look for in a manuscript as a commissioning editor?
So what I look for is maybe a little bit different, maybe in Zubaan, maybe a little bit different from what I was going to say an actual commissioning editor, but I mean somebody with a list that is market focused.
After that.
So what I end up looking for, I think, is less something that is list focused and more trying to look for what the author or that particular story is trying to do. And it's kind of an interesting process because sometimes you have to look past, a lot of the time you have to look past your own understanding of what you think writing should be, or like narrative conventions should be, because one of our things at Zubaan is that the way that those narrative conventions are built or storytelling has been understood is has been dictated to us in the same way that many other kind of conventions have, by largely Western, largely white, largely male creators.
Yeah.
And it's not like we want to ignore those conventions, but they aren't in any way the only ones of value. So, what I'm trying to do when I'm reading a manuscript is seeing what this person is trying to build.
Yeah.
And if
It's
what they're trying to build is, if it's interesting, if it's new, if I feel like it resonates with me or anybody else that I can imagine reading it, then that's a good thing. On And then there's also, the feminism slash is it feminist question, which I'm
yes,
not
I
sure
will.
has any answer, is also one thing we think about.
Yeah. No, I completely agree because, like you said, it's almost like you're reading something and you have to sort of make a judgment on whether this is good, and whether this is publishable. But at the same time, you're constantly aware of sort of, that you have to unlearn. You're aware that you have certain ideas in your mind of how a story should be like and what a book should look like, and you have to sort of constantly question that as well and think that, oh, is this actually bad, or am I just like forced to think that something else is good?
Mm-hmm.
you know
Yeah, conveniently, there are some times I think we manage to get away with certain things because we have a very clear, like, I'll say agenda, which might set
yeah.
off a few red flags, but just, everybody has an agenda.
Yeah.
Ours is not to publish the story of a, young straight Brahmin man who goes to a big city after his MBA and falls in love with a girl and then spends the entire book, I don't know, harassing her or like irritating her into marrying him.
Yeah.
Um, so it's easy to not have to actually read every single thing you get, because if it's not something that fits in a publishing list about women by women, then partly I think people who are writing also, they know, or at least if you're interested in writing, you know what the publishing houses you're approaching do. And if what they do is not what you're writing, then maybe it was a long shot to begin with. Unless, of course,
Yeah.
what they are doing is, limited because they should be looking at what you're doing.
Hmm.
Hopefully, what we do is stay open to that possibility. But yeah, some things are definitely not for us.
Yeah, I think what I'm getting from you is also, this question of you publish feminist books. What does feminist books mean? I
Mm-hmm.
think, the question, I think it's also easier to say that, oh, this is not what we want to publish. Like, it's easier to define by saying not this than say, acha, this is the kind of work we publish. Because the moment you say we publish one particular kind of thing, you're sort of closing it off a little bit to sort of different voices, different books, different experiences. So you want to keep that open as a definition
Yeah,
of something.
exactly. It's not even the books that are feminist. It is we that have to be feminist when we're looking at them.
Yeah,
Otherwise, I'm not sure if we can be like, otherwise, what are you doing quality checking how good or how feminist another book is? Can't do that. All you can do
yeah,
is be aware of what you're doing when you're selecting whether or not you're going to engage with the thing, which I think we all do on a daily basis. Who is we all? I don't know. But people who are thinking about feminism
yeah,
do on a daily basis with the people and what they read. And so this is, to me, converting that to your work day, really, and thinking
yeah.
about what your work day, how what you do in those 8, 10, 12, 16 hours impacts the world or impacts even one other person in the world.
So how is that decision made? Because obviously when I was interning at Zubaan, I got to sit in like one of our like publishing or like editorial meetings where we sort of were looking at the lists of what you guys are publishing in the next year. So how are those decisions made? How do you take that call finally if say you find five books, five manuscripts that are publishable or worthy of publishing? How do you then take that call of, okay, which ones are we actually going to publish and which ones are we maybe not going to publish for whatever reasons?
I have to say, we are very rarely in this position where there are five manuscripts and we have to choose which ones not to publish. Usually it's, there are three. Okay, we'll do all three and we must find more. But
Okay.
the decision making internally, I think, is maybe a very concise, with some steps taken out version of what anybody else would do at a publishing house, which is we one of us will read it and one of us will decide, okay, this is my thing, I'm going to like hit people over the head with this for the next 3 months until they agree with me. And so then we try and get one more commissioning editor to read it, and they can get away with reading it slightly less carefully because they are the second opinion.
Yeah.
And maybe sometimes I think Urvashi also does this, to ask old interns if they can read things for us, and because they spent some time listening to us and listening in on those conversations and participating in the conversations about what Zubaan's trying to do. So we send it to them and say, look, what do you think? Is this something that you think fits? And ask them to do a reader's report or something like that. And then once that's done, and once you've gotten somebody else to say, I agree, or at least I roughly agree, but I think it'll need XYZ things to be done by the author and you, then it's just a matter, like, it's just like a group consensus almost, of which you have slightly more responsibility, because you have to say, no, trust me, it's going to be great. And then everyone says, okay. And then at the end, if it doesn't do well, we usually don't blame it on the book, but we blame it on people's small minds.
Oh, you blame it on, yes, that makes sense.
You can always justify it by saying, people just not ready.
Yeah, India is not ready for this book, this amazing path-breaking book,
The world is not ready. I was not ready.
Yeah, actually, this brings me to one of my questions, which is because you aren't looking at books in terms of their saleability, or you're not looking at them in terms of like, oh, what will sell in the market or what does this market want? How do you know when a book is successful?
It's not that saleability is not an issue for us. We just try and not make it the first conversation we have, and also look at it less like a fixed variable. Not sure if I use that right. It's been a while since I mathed. But it's something that we want to work on, because part of what we're doing at Zubaan anyway is saying that, look, you all don't even understand what a market is. Okay? Because half the people who could be reading your books are not reading them because you're not talking to them. If that is the kind of aggressive argument we're making, then we ourselves will have to look at saleability in a different way. So if it's a book that I read and think, wow, I have never read this kind of book before, it should be in the market, or let's just say it should be available for other people to read, then I have to trust that there are other people out there who will think the same thing, but they're not going to get to it unless it exists. So we have to find ways of getting the book out that changes what is the like perceived saleability of the thing. And partly the people who buy Zubaan books are the ones who keep us going, because they will come back and say, didn't know I wanted this book and then I read it and it was amazing. Please do more things like this. And in many ways, the numbers of how many books get sold is one way that we can, like anybody else, see that something has been successful, of course, on a very different scale than a global publishing house. Yeah. But it really is people will just land up and say, look, I like this book. And I liked it because I haven't read something like this, or I liked it because it has this author who I actually know and follow, and they come from my like small town in Sikkim or whatever, and it's nice to see them written, like see them in a book. So I think that's like success is maybe not just saleability. Success is, can you see people appreciating that the thing exists, and those ones are the ones that are successful.
I think Zubaan is able to do something particular that maybe not publishing houses are able to do, like generally or in India, which is that it's almost like a brand in itself, right? Like when people decide what books to read, they're just looking at genres, or they're looking at, acha, these are the books similar to this, right? But I think Zubaan has been able to create that niche where it's almost like, hey, if I want to read something about like certain communities, or if I want to read something that I know that I won't find anywhere else, something that will question or challenge like my idea of a good book, or what kind of books I have read, then I will go look at Zubaan's list, which itself I feel like is a um, metric of success in some way, right? I mean, it's like overall success in some sense. I'm not buttering
Thanks,
you up.
Josh. Are you sure? I mean,
I'm not.
thanks anyway.
No,
No,
I'm not.
I think you're right. That is the power of curation in many ways. And it's something that small indies can also, like small indies in India and other places can also say, which is that you're not you're not competing in just like a bookstore. Uh, there are also people who will recognize that certain things are coming out of certain places, or at least certain roots, which is really what we are. And I think that's a huge reason why we're still going, is that people recognize that this book has come from Zubaan. Okay, now go back, check if there are more books from Zubaan. And
Yeah.
it's equally true in the non-academic, um, for a non-academic reader. For academic readers, especially people who history, gender studies, overall liberal arts work, researchers, scholars, they know that, okay, if I need this thing, it's probably going to be in this one place. And for a lot of books about women's writing, women's history, it's probably Zubaan or a couple of other places as well. Now, and this is a good thing, even though it's not a good thing for our number of books we publish, that might be available in other places as well. But it still holds that a lot of the older stuff will be either with us or Women Unlimited. Um, but yeah, the same kind of thing is happening with trade books, fiction and nonfiction, and maybe a little bit with the kids' books as well. I'm going to be perpetually worried about that. But
Yeah.
yeah, people recognize it. But it's still a very small, it's still a very small part of, it's maybe a small number of people who recognize it, I think, still, which is never as obvious to me as when we do our annual internship interviews, and
Yes.
there will be a bunch of people who say, yes, I know what Zubaan is. I read Zubaan's books, Zubaan's list is something that I understand.
Yeah.
But maybe if that's what we try and do, right? Create more converts so that they can come back, buy our books, and we can find more new authors to publish their
Yes.
books. People will come back, buy their books, and
Yes.
so on ad infinitum.
Yeah. And when I was asking about sort of success metrics, I also meant things like beyond celebrity, like reprints, or like prizes. These other sort of things that give books credibility in some way.
Yeah, reprints are definitely a good indicator if the book is doing well. But you also have to measure it against what the book is. Our thing is it more important to say that, look, this thing is commercially viable, or is it more important to say, I don't care if it's commercially viable, we will find a way to make sure it exists. That's what we're trying to do. So,
I like that.
so you kind of have to look at each book as its own thing. Some books that are not very, very timely fiction pieces might not sell out and then get reprinted and then get reprinted and get reprinted. not everything is going to be like an instant bestseller. And by not everything, I mean most things are not going to be instant bestsellers. But there might be things which over the course of like 10 years steadily stay in print. Or the minute they go out of print, you have people asking about them. And even if it's not viable, and this is what we're trying to do, even if it's not viable to do a full reprint, we can do smaller reprints and get those books to the people who want them. And I think it's a different kind of relationship that people have. It's not tear through this book type of reading, but it is something that you decide you want, or you want to go back to over and over again, and it doesn't matter if it happens in 5 years, you'll read it then. But yeah, so some books are like that, and they are equally, like, they equally deserve to stay alive and stay on shelves and for people to know about them and be able to find them. So that saleability thing is kind of a, like, I don't want to say you take it with a grain of salt. It's just not the most nuanced understanding of the value of a book.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's not sort of your first priority when you're thinking about a book.
Yeah.
That's not your first
Maybe it should
point
be.
of consideration.
Maybe it should be, and then we wouldn't be broke all the time.
Who is your ideal reader and who is your ideal writer for you?
I don't know if there is an ideal reader. That's the thing.
Achha.
But, or at least I don't know how to describe that person in a, like, you know, she must be this tall. She must already be a feminist. But I think the ideal reader is someone who will. How about not ideal reader? This is the person I want to find our books, which is somebody who will look at the book and be open to it, regardless of what it is, regardless of if there's a woman's name on the thing, or a queer person's name, or a non-binary name. Will read the book and say, I want more of this. That's really all.
Yes.
The people we're trying to reach. Not that we don't love our militant feminist readers as militant feminists ourselves, but they'll come back.
Yeah.
Because
It's
that
about
solidarity is
approaching
already
new
there.
readers. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's about making space in people's lives for things that they didn't realize they wanted. In a larger sense also. I think ideal writer is something else. There is no ideal writer. I think it's just the only thing that I really, really appreciate, and I'm lucky to have this with most of my authors, which is be open to feedback. That's it. And I know it's really, 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 really difficult because you've written something and it means so much to you. Like, you have created it from nothing. So it is disconcerting, scary, like disorienting when someone says the thing that you made needs to be changed in this way because I say so.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
But it's not going to go away. Like, if anything else, you'll still have the previous draft. It will still exist. You will not lose anything. And I think, yeah, in return for that, it is the editor's job to recognize when the authors write about things and when they've made a call that the editor perhaps didn't see or point out something. And that happens all the time. Like, it's a partnership. It's not a, one person knows more.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not that. It is the same as talking to your friend about something. I mean, it's not. There's a like money relationship in there as well. But it is the same as talking to your friend about something you're worried about and they're telling you something. It's an exchange. They're coming from their own experience of the thing. I am coming from my own experience of books, as is the author. So it's more about, and I think maybe the taking feedback thing or being open to feedback thing is more just about having a good relationship with authors. So that's the thing that mostly I want, despite my always sending them things late.
And did you always wanted to work with like children's books or young adult fiction? Because that's a lot of what you do, right? I mean, because you are managing sort of Young Zubaan, which is the children's and young adult book list.
Yeah. So I will give away too much of myself in answering this question, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Please do.
But I also commission for the adult lists and sometimes for the academic books. But yeah, primarily my official job is with Young Zuban. It's like everyone has some books that they read when they were kids that will just forever be a part of them. So a lot of books that I read as a kid, I think, are similarly embedded in my soul and how I see the world. And some of them are very, very obvious suspects, and it's difficult also to talk about them now because of everything that has happened. But the Harry Potter series were a huge part of my childhood. Huge.
Same.
And that, I think, like for a lot of people, especially a lot of queer people, was something that we just saw ourselves in. I don't know why. There were no queer people in it. Like, I don't know what we were thinking.
They were after the fact.
I'm sorry. I don't buy this, like, writing people's queerness into it afterwards and then never showing it. Very convenient. But that's what I mean. It's like, when you're starved for it, you will find
it anywhere.
Yourself in any message of acceptance. In any, like, anti-bigotry message, you will find yourself. Or at least as a child. But yeah, so the reason why I bring up that which shall not be named, she who should not be named, is that most of my teen years, including when I should have been studying for my boards, probably was spent reading a lot of fan fiction, and that has permanently altered my brain chemistry and brain structure. But also it has really, that and one more series, unfortunately both of these are white women writing, but another series called Animorphs, which was very big in my school in class 6 and 7.
I haven't heard of
Around the same time that everyone was reading Goosebumps, I was not okay with the Goosebumps because I was like, what is this story? It's so unsatisfying. It ends in like 30 pages and you picked the pages. I don't like it. But so the Animorphs books, those two things have just, if they stay in your head this much time after, like 16 years after I've read them, clearly they're doing something. And if I find myself referring to things people have said or thought in those books as ways of seeing the world, clearly what's going on in your formative years and what you're reading is kind of important. And of course, there are a lot of us, I think, as adults. There are a lot of us as adults who are reading middle grade books, picture books, young adult novels.
Yes, I love reading young adult novels, and I feel like, sometimes they are more sort of thoughtful, they're covering like meaningful topics. They're sort of tackling a lot of issues or a lot of concerns that I think in a lot of ways that adult novels don't do. Like, I don't know, there's something very satisfying about reading a young adult novel,
No,
as
I
an
agree.
adult, as a barely functioning adult. And I'm thinking of this book, Dear Mrs. Naidu. And I remember reading this book while I was interning at Zubaan. And I loved this book, because obviously it is doing that. It is, talking about experiences which are different from mine as a reader, that I never have thought about. And it's talking about sort of this village life and, lack of sort of access to education. And it's also like representation, but it's also beyond that. I think what I really liked about it is it's showing action. It's not just sort of saying, hey, look, like look at people facing issues, which I feel like a lot of books stop at. But it's sort of saying, look at this person taking charge of their life. Look at how she's, like gathering the people around her and building a community and doing things. And that can, be sort of inspirational. But I think that's also like a really cool kind of a book. I mean, that book is really cool for all the different things that it does. And it's something that I read as an adult, right? And it has stayed with me the way, like, books that I read as a child or books that I've read as a young adult have stayed with me.
I totally get what you're saying of like books that deal with reality and the complicated nature of reality for many, many, many children in this country and elsewhere, sometimes what ends up happening is that you just say, look at this, look how bad it is.
Yeah.
Which is true, but
Like, what beyond that?
like, agreed, yeah, you say look at this, say it on Twitter. If it's going to be a book and you want there to be a narrative, and also you want the person who is now looking to feel like, and right now I think a lot of things feel like we cannot do anything about them. But if you want to keep that thing alive of like look, this is the thing and something must be done also, for example, this can be done, that is a nice, like, it's not even a formula, that is just a nice way to keep the reader, in this case a child or a grown-ass human like you or me who also love that book,
Yeah.
and other books like it, keep them going on that journey of like discovering what they can do, what they will grow up and be able to do.
So, what are young adult books or children's books that you're reading right now as an adult that you're not reading for work but for
Huh.
fun? I
I
remember you were
have.
reading Rainbow Rowell a lot.
Oh, actually, I did just read her follow up to Carry On called Wayward Son, which very problematically references a song that is the theme song for a show that has been even worse with queerness in the recent past. But that's an excellent book.
Yes.
Carry On is an excellent book. I'm also just starting this book that has been floating around my book club for a while. A copy that someone got me, and then I knew I would never read it because I had 17 other things on my bedside table. But it's called Akata Warrior, and it's the follow-up to a book called Akata Witch, which is going to be a trilogy. Everybody's very excited, by a writer called Nnedi Okorafor, I think. Just started. I will report back and tell you how it is. Second books are always tricky.
I know. Definitely do that. Report back. So, how has the pandemic been for you? As an editor, in the sense of, I know that because of the pandemic, a lot of publishing houses have had to sort of shift their focus or, push publications like books to next year or sort of do a lot of moving around. So, as an editor, how has that been for you? And, I also want to mention, because I read, Urvashi's scroll article, about publishing in the pandemic, where, you sort of talk about how it's been really strange to be working on books and, promoting books while like people have to walk all the way home and there are sort of all of these other issues happening. So how has, as an editor now this far, how has sort of the experience been like?
It's been weird. I think the vibe of my quote for that article was "It's been weird," because
Yeah.
it just. I think if you're not doing something that feels like it's actively helping, you question what you're doing and how important it could possibly be if you're not participating in, you know, improving material conditions for people who are saying, please improve my material conditions.
Yeah.
But we all have to, I guess, I mean, we all have to work. And I remember that I do love Zubaan and what Zubaan does. And I can do this thing better than somebody who hasn't been doing it for 7 years. Let's just have that be the qualifier. I can do it better than someone who hasn't done it for some time or for
Yes.
as long. And so I try and focus on that. I think everybody maybe in this pandemic is performing a daily act of waking up in the morning and being like, wow, okay, the world is on fire. How do I get through the day? And then you have to convince yourself that you have to do the things that day that might help in some way.
Yeah.
And that's
It's
what
twofold,
I've been
right? It's
doing.
like you wake up and you think, how am I going to get through the day and what am I going to do that matters in some way, in any way?
Yeah. I have my healthy response to the first question is don't even think about it. And then my therapist is like, buddy, no, please think about it. the advice that I give to my nieces is do not compare yourselves with other people. But there is a healthy aspect to comparing yourselves to other people when you're an adult and can understand that there are much, much worse situations to be in, and perhaps yours is not the worst. And I've read some truly atrocious things by people saying, God, it's so hard to be me right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of people are dying. A lot of people are sick and have no access to medicine. And yeah, it's very, it's difficult to feel that upset about your own circumstances when you see that. Not that it still doesn't suck to be stuck in the house for anybody else. And if someone is like, I hate being cooped in, I also hate being cooped in. Absolutely. I wish more people, I think it's happening slowly.
Yeah.
That it's harder to avoid the reality of what's going on outside of your door. Ironically,
when you're stuck in it.
Weirdly enough, you are stuck inside. Everything is breaking down. So we have to build it again, not glue back together the broken parts, honestly.
That's true. Okay, I'm gonna bring us to a lighter note.
Oh, good. Good, because I'm in danger of lecturing.
Yeah. What's your favorite thing about working at Zubaan?
Not having to make lunch.
That's true.
Doesn't apply anymore.
You have amazing fresh lunches. Yes, not anymore.
It's true. Doesn't apply anymore, but okay. So now, nice people, other militant feminists, other angry anti-capitalists. That is the best.
Okay. What is the best part of being an editor and the worst part of being an editor?
The best part is getting to read. And that sounds like a formulaic response, but it is. It is getting to read new things and not getting stuck in what you would normally read. The worst part is having to read for work. This is going to be the most... Yeah, so I don't read outside of work often because of that.
That's fair. Okay. What do you do when you're not reading or editing?
At work or at home?
What do you
at
do
work or not at work?
Not at work.
Spend a lot of time on YouTube and some more time also on YouTube. Mostly watching cooking videos.
Thank you so much, Ishani, for doing this and for coming on the Book People and talking to us about all of these things.
I'm happy to be here. It's nice to talk to the book people. It's nice to talk to you. I feel like any excuse, even though this is technically a work thing, it's nice to talk to somebody about things because I always have to drag myself to that, even though I know I'll enjoy it. So thanks.
So that was Ishani Butalia talking about how independent publishing houses don't focus on saleability, but more on whether this book needs to exist in India or in society. And I really liked how she described the editor and author relationship like a partnership, where there is some sort of back and forth. So this series is brought to you by Bound, a company that helps you tell your stories. Find us at Bound India on all social platforms and check out the video version of this series on YouTube if you haven't done that already. If you want to pitch your book to us, definitely send us your book pitch and at least 3 chapters of your manuscript at connect@boundindia.com. And you can figure out the different kinds of publishing and publishing houses that exist in India with our free research document called Demystifying Indian Publishing, and the link for that is in the description below. Thanks for tuning into The Book People. I'm Aishwarya, and I'll be back next week with another guest and a new question to answer. Until then, keep reading.